We're here in the magnificent surroundings of the British Academy, and we're here for the purposes of the Global Challenges Research Fund to address the great global challenges of our times. Specifically today, we're looking at the subject of protracted conflict. The time's gone when solutions are in the global north and the problems are in the global south. Since the 1990s, we've seen a marked spike in the number of conflicts within states rather than between states. That is a huge feature of the international landscape of our time.
Look today what has happened in Rwanda, when near 800,000 Tutsis were killed simply because of who they are. The same with the Yazidi population in Iraq. You cannot today speak about funding development if you don't also look about the best way to really make peace being sustained.
Not all intervention is good. In fact, some intervention is quite destructive.
There's class issues and gender issues and ethnic issues and religious issues that essentially make it much more difficult to just intervene with a policy.
In the room today, we've got leading academic researchers working from a whole variety of disciplines, but we also critically have policymakers and practitioners. They may come from NGOs and civil society, they may come from major international aid agencies and development organisations, they might come from the world of government, they might come from the UN system and its specialised agencies.
Many of the armed conflicts in which the ICRC operates today in places like Afghanistan, the DRC, Iraq and Sudan, to name but a few, have gone on intermittently for decades. Even with all the experience that we have accumulated, all of us here, humanitarian and development practitioners, policymakers or academics, we are still struggling to know how best to approach and respond to the challenges of long modern wars in all their complexity.
What we're hoping to do today is to break down the traditional silos. We need to forge a dialogue, and a much closer dialogue, across those different worlds.
What are the issues that are most at the foremost of people's minds when they're trying to develop policy for intervention in these very difficult situations? What's really driving them as they try and engage with local actors, try and engage with warring factions? So is it things like gender issues? Is it things like who has power in a particular situation? Which kinds of conflict resolution actually work in practice? So that's where I think research can really feed in, particularly comparative research. We've heard that a number of times through the day. They're looking across countries and across protracted conflicts and give policymakers a sense of really what works in different situations and what doesn't work, which is probably just important actually.
What we hadn't looked at is that violence is also, it's a behavior, it's a contagion, it's got its own rules.
It will be extremely useful to have solid research to better understand how the situation evolves in protracted conflict, not just over a few years, but over sometimes generations. How do respect for humanitarian norms evolve? How do actually the perceptions that people have of humanitarian action and aid in general evolves over time? These are critical questions and we need more evidence.
While we have been relatively successful at reducing conflict over time, that trend is now reversing almost single-handedly with the figures from Syria.
The one thing that has really struck me is how we need to really view and understand patterns of conflict and recurrences, and maybe in fact move away from a sort of resolution prevention or prevention resolution to looking at how we continually deal with conflict in all its nascent and latent and active cycles.
Research can bring many critical insights. The international development system often seems as though it's condemned to repeat mistakes in the past. So when there have been mistakes and policy failures in the past, when there have been inadvertent and unintended consequences of aid, what's actually happened? If we can unpick that and better understand it together, then we've got a fighting chance of not making those mistakes again in future.
What we have to do today, more than ever, is to invest on prevention. What will come out of this conference will definitely help to identify also where there is a need to invest more in terms of prevention. And I commend the efforts which are being made from London and which will definitely also impact throughout the world.